Hello and welcome to another Döhle Yachts coffee break. My name is Joe Assel and I'm the technical director here at Döhle Yachts. And today I'm joined by Alex Meredith Hardy, the principal naval architect at Lateral Naval Architecture. Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So today we're going to talk about refit stability. So I think set the scene for us, Alex. What kind of projects do you get involved in with respect to refit and looking at the stability?
Yeah, so I mean, refit-wise, you get a big range out there. We tend to get involved mainly when there's sort of quite significant technical alterations going on. So probably not so much if it's just a bit of interior shuffling, but if we're moving bulkheads or if we're adding superstructure or taking superstructure away, a lot of stern extensions, with those sort of projects we get very involved in, and obviously conversions as well. So, usually the aspects where there's quite a major technical sort of change is the sort of refits where we tend to get involved.
And then that, I guess, poses the question of how important is it to have a naval architect involved in the refit proposal and to assess the general feasibility?
Yeah, I think it depends on the refit. I think if you're going to have a sort of refit which is quite tricky, or there's a lot of sort of technically risky aspects, or if the yacht itself is quite close to the limit in its existing form, so let's say it's close to its draft mark limit, or if it's close to its stability limits, then those sort of aspects make it much more important to have a feasibility study done to make sure that the changes you're going to make are actually going to work and you're not going to be left with serious problems at the end of the process. So it's sort of it's an investment that you have to judge whether it's worth making, and you've got to take it on a case by case basis.
Okay, so what would be involved in that kind of feasibility study if it was deemed necessary to conduct it for the project we're involved in?
So yeah, there's a whole host of things. From my sort of area, the naval architecture. The primary aspects are probably sort of stability and weight, which we can talk about in a bit. But other things we might check is, how's the gross tonnage of the yacht changing? Are we going to go over any sort of limitations or regulation limitations? Speed and range. Are we adding a lot of weight to the yacht, or are we changing the hull form where the speed and range may be impacted? Freeboards, is there enough height to the shell doors and things like that still? Coal regs, the lights and mast positions, do the alterations impact those aspects? We'll also have a look at comfort as well. Is there going to be an impact on the sort of seakeeping behaviour of the yacht? If we're changing the weight distribution, will the roll characteristics of the yacht be changing? And then I guess most importantly, fundamentally, is the yacht strong enough? Is the strength of the hull going to withstand the changes that you're planning to make? So, there's a whole sort of menu of things to look at, but we typically sort of tailor it depending on what the refit was and how ambitious it is.
So there's quite a few elements you mentioned there that would require benchmark information. So what effect would it have on comfort? Has the stability been adversely affected? Speed? What kind of information do you need in order to assess those? Does that all have to be available beforehand, or can you develop that information during the refit to give to the owner afterwards?
Yes, normally we'd sort of ask for a proposal of what the refit entails. What is the job that is being planned? What's the concept of what you're trying to achieve? And then we would take a sort of package of information for the existing yachts. So it's existing plans, it's existing calculations and stability books and things like that. And from that, we would then work up our feasibility study. and the aim would be to be able to deliver a sort of yes/no answer to whether it's feasible before the actual refit goes ahead, so that the client can progress in confidence that what they want to do to the yacht is actually going to work, and they're not going to run into any big issues.
And I guess that's a really fundamental kind of role of a naval architect, whereas the designer may have come up with a fantastic concept or a change they want to do on board, but you're effectively validating that change can physically be made within the laws of physics, and to make sure that the boat's still going to perform correctly.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, really. A lot of the proposals we do get, sometimes are, too ambitious, or, the sort of technical aspects haven't been really considered, and in those cases we'll work to try and sort of modify the intent as much as possible, keep the intent as much as possible, but within the realms of what is feasible for that yacht. So it needs to be done in coordination with the designer or whoever's coming up with the sort of the idea for the refit. Yep, exactly.
Excellent. And you touched on it earlier, but why is it important to monitor the stability and weight during these periods, and then obviously looking forward as well?
Yeah, so from the naval architecture point of view, weight is important because all our yachts have a sort of draft limit, the load line limit, and that sets out the yacht's ability to carry its load. And if the refit that you're going to do is pushing the yacht over her load line mark, then there's going to be consequences to that. Which is typically you'll have to carry less load, which could mean less fuel and range, could be less fresh water, could be less owners' items. So it's really important to understand where the limit is and how close the refit might be pushing to that limit. And then on the stability side, it's sort of linked but also separate. Is the vertical center of gravity of the yacht will obviously affect its stability. And when we're talking about stability, we're talking from a safety point of view. Is the yacht within the regulations and not at risk of capsizing? So, if your refit is going to increase the height of the center of gravity, you could find yourself in a situation where suddenly you are non-compliant with stability, in which case you need to make some modifications, and that typically is adding ballast, which then has a knock-on effect on your weight and your draft again. So those two critical items are really important to monitor, because otherwise you could have consequences to the changes that you're making.
So it sounds like everything really is linked back to that weight, and ensuring we monitor that correctly during that refit phase and moving forward is obviously key. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about that process of monitoring the weights.
Yeah, so quite often on the refits, we get involved during the actual refit process. So the start of the project, the sort of design intent is set, and then how do you get that project through the refit and make sure that it comes out on the target that you want? So what we typically do we would go in and do an inclining test sort of before the refit, and that is surveying the existing yacht in its existing condition, and that will give us a really good baseline as to which to one, carry out the feasibility study, but two, also to monitor the progress of the yacht, and then we'll work up a stability model in our software. We'll then start to liaise with whoever's doing the work, so usually a shipyard, and we'll talk to them about how they're calculating their weights off and weights on, and what they expect the status of the weight to be towards the end of the refit. And that's a sort of continuous process that goes on, with various iterations of new information coming in or design changes happening, and and at various milestones through the refit, we will rerun all our calculations and check that the stability is on track and is the weight on track, and are there any sort of issues that might be coming up that may need sort of changes to the plan and things. And then when we sort of get to the end of the refit, we'll then do a final inclining test, which hopefully gets approved, and then that will then go into the final stability book. And so that's the sort of process. And really, it's there to try and avoid any nasty surprises at the end of the refit. So it's not necessarily appropriate for all refits, but the ones which are more critical or more substantial, it's a worthwhile process to invest in.
Sounds it, and especially seeing as we've got kind of both safety and regulatorily critical items with respect to stability, weight, load line that you mentioned there as well. I think we can only suggest that if in doubt, we need to be talking to a naval architect to ensure that we're going to be safe and legal.
Yeah, exactly. And these situations are fairly black and white. So if you're, if you're over the limit, it's quite a difficult situation to be in, and it's best avoided. So
yes.
They are important issues, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's been really enlightening, Alex. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that everyone watching this found that interesting. As ever, our contact details are going to be at the end. So if you've got any questions for Alex at Lateral Naval Architectures or for us, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. Once again, Alex, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.